Thanks again for being here, and I'm pleased to introduce our two guests. Our first guest, starting here on my far right, is John Warren, a graduate of Washington and Lee, the NYU Stern School of Business, an infantry officer in the Marines for 6 years, to include service in what was then the most dangerous city in the world, Ramadi, Iraq. From 2009 to 2018, he was the CEO and founder of Lima One Capital, which became the leading real estate lender in America for real estate investors, a company that he sold. In 2021, he started GEM, G-E-M, Mining, which is, I got to read this to make sure I get all these words right, a privately held, institutional grade Bitcoin mining company with 32,000 miners. And I'm so thankful that when he was telling me that, in the same sentence, he mentioned to me that, and of course, as you know, he said, a miner in this business is a computer that you have under contract to you to mine these things, because had he not said that, I would have said, how did you hire 32,000 people in Greenville, South Carolina? And I mean, and where do you dig for these things? You know, but so that's how that works.
I've actually been asked that question before, Bob. How did you hire?
Thank goodness. Well, obviously it was somebody that was in the Army. It wasn't a Marine. So John is married to Courtney, who couldn't be with us today, and has 3 children. John Thompson, also known as Top, grew up in New York on Long Island. He was a star high school athlete, joined the Marines, was in the Marines 21 years with 9 deployments, 5 of which were combat deployments, including Persian Gulf War I. Has multiple awards for valor. John Warren, the other John, is also decorated. John Thompson, Top, is the chief operating officer, was the chief operating officer of Lima One, and is now the chief operating officer of GEM Mining. And they're really a great example of, I think, one of the parts of the American military that's really, I don't know how we invented this, but it's just a genius thing. The system that we have of officers and non-commissioned officers, both taking the platoon or the company or the division or whatever the unit is to the highest level of performance possible. And it's a lesson that not many militaries, and an organizational structure that not many militaries in the world use. Certainly I don't think the Russians use it, and I think that they wish that they did. But they were very effective in the Marines, and they obviously are being very effective in business. Their book came out in June, I think June or May or June. July, okay. And after a very short time of being out, I think I have a copy of this at home. I think it was the July 17th issue of USA Today had their book as the 25th best-selling book in America, and that list includes all the fiction, and there weren't that many nonfiction books on it. They cracked that list, and it has been amazingly successful. They've been in publications all over the country. I mean, just one as an example, here it is. They were in United Airlines magazine. And so, I mean, but they've been everywhere, and they've done appearances such as this all over the place, because the book is still selling well. If you will Google "Lead Like a Marine," it will take several pages for you to get through all of the reviews and the comments and everything on it. It's doing very, very well. They're going to sell their book after the lecture, but we're going to have a conversation today. So, either one of you, what were the motives and the goals behind writing this book? And there are 10,000 leadership books out there. How is this one different?
Well, I think it starts off with the unique relationship John and I have. It's very rare that you'll see an enlisted and an officer who bond together in combat, continue on that relationship, become great close friends and family friends. I consider him my brother. Move on from that. We both get out in 2009, 2010, and then get together, take the principles that we learned in combat and built Lima One Capital into a national powerhouse with over 250 employees. And then we were able to sell that company in less than 9 years for over 9 figures. So there's a ton of leadership books out there. There's a ton of leadership books from former military personnel. I think ours is unique and rare, where you'll see an enlisted an officer accomplish what we did. And hey, we got bloody noses in combat, but we learned from that, and that's how we built Lima One Capital.
We got a lot of bloody noses at Lima One Capital too. Yeah, just to reiterate what Top said, I think it all goes back to our core values. I think the Marine Corps and I think the military in general is just an amazing breeding ground for people from diverse backgrounds, different races, different sexes, different geographies, and they share these common traits that make them want to serve. And we in the Marine Corps call it core values: honor, courage, and commitment. And it's all about that. That's what bonds us. And I think our country can learn a lot of lessons from the military, because it seems like today everyone wants to stress what's pulling us apart, what's separating us, what makes all of us different. But I think when you look at me and Top, we come from very different backgrounds. But the thing that makes it so important, our relationship, we share the same core values. And I think that's one of the things that people really don't understand about the military, and especially the Marines, is that shared bond. And we took that from combat to the Marines, came out and transferred that to business. And I think it's a really unique story.
Before we get into the specific chapters and various leadership principles that you discuss in the book, what would you say are some of the overarching themes of the book, and what are the essentials for leading like a Marine?
So I think if you look at our story overall, I think it's a very inspirational story. I mean, when we came out of the Marine Corps, neither of us had a ton of money. Neither of us knew what we were really going to do. The money I had, I spent on a diamond ring to ask Courtney to marry me. And it's a story of overcoming adversity and grit. For all of the positive stories that we tell in the book, we probably tell or could tell 10 failures that led up to that success. And I think when you really boil down our story, I think it really comes down to 3 things. And number one, I stress core values, really what is in a person's soul and their character. And that's who we look for in the Marines. That's who we look for at Lima One. That's what I want to instill in my kids, are their core values. And then secondly, I think it's really critically thinking. I think that's lacking a lot of times in society and business. If you ask someone why they do something, they say, well, we've always done it this way. Or they say, well, that's the industry standard. And we don't do that, and it goes back to Ramadi, and we think outside the box. We look at situations objectively and come up with innovative ways to solve complex problems. And when you look at entrepreneurs in general, I think entrepreneurs are successful because they see the world a little bit different. They do see the complex problems, but they come up with simplistic solutions to those, and then they build companies around them. And I tell people, if you want a super successful company, solve a complex problem in the most simplistic way, right? Think about the iPhone. What did it solve? Internet, phone, it was everything in one. So, and then the final thing I would say, core values, think critically, do everything for a reason. And number 3, it's be blunt and direct with people. We find that in society, especially in the South, everyone wants to use the sandwich approach, right? Like, hey, someone's got problems, you need to counsel them. So you start out with a huge compliment. Mike, I want you to know you're a hard worker. We love having you at the company. We need you to work on this one little thing, but we love having you here. And we by the end of that, they don't know, are you counseling, or are you positive, are you negative? And we found that in the Marine Corps, being blunt and direct was the most vital trait outside of core values and thinking critically. So I think the book kind of starts with those 3 things.
John, you mentioned in those remarks, do everything for a reason. And you call that one of the most vital principles that you discuss in the book. So tell us, what does that really mean, and how do you develop that principle inside of the business?
Yeah, I think a great example is you have to, first of all, you have to be laser focused when you're building a business. You have to have goals and objectives. A great story we tell in the book is early on in the business, we had an investment banker and we were going to go down to Miami and meet this man called William Irby, who's a billionaire, and we were hoping to get some financing from him. So we prepared, we were ready to go, and our ask was going to be, hey, or our tell was going to be, hey, we're going to be $1 billion originator. Now keep in mind at the time we were originating probably $3 million a month, all right? But we went down there with the confidence, and we had an investment banker, and prior to getting into the meeting, which we only had 30 minutes with William Irby, the investment banker was like, hey, you're overarching, don't tell them you're going to be $1 billion originator. Stick with 500 million. That is, so we go through the meeting. He loves it. He obviously read the pitch deck. And then at the end, he goes, well, tell me, guys, what do you think your annual loan originations will be next year? And we looked at each other. We looked at our investment banker, and he kind of shook his head, basically say, don't do it. We said, we think we're going to be at 500 million. He folded his folder up, put our pitch away, and said, hey, it was really great to meet you guys, but I don't deal with anybody who doesn't originate more than $1 billion a year. And we lost out on financing. So to recap that, obviously we fired the investment banker as we were walking back to our hotel. But that is something that was really early on, and that's where it's like, hey, those are our beliefs. Let's do everything for a reason. We think we can get there, then we got to pitch it. So that's just a quick story of how really do everything for a reason works out.
And I think we formed that, in fighting the counterinsurgency in Ramadi. When we got there, it was 2006, March. It was pre-surge. Everything was chaotic. There was absolutely no counterinsurgency strategy going on in Anbar province. And we worked for an amazing company commander, Max Barella. We talk a lot about him in the book. But he really thought outside the box. And he said, hey, how are we going to defeat this insurgency? And I mean, it was utter chaos. I think we were averaging about 28 attacks on US personnel each day in Ramadi. So it was a very kinetic environment. And one of the things that he did was he said, you know what, we should probably think about why does the insurgency exist? And what we realized was the insurgency exists, well, first of all, there are different types of insurgents. There was Al-Qaeda, and you could not negotiate with them. You either had to kill or capture them. But then you had this other group, which was by far the largest group, and it was called the Nationalists. And they were Sunni nationals, a lot of sheikhs, imam, tribal leaders, former colonels and generals in the Iraqi army, and they hated Iran, they hated Al-Qaeda. They wanted a strong Iraq, and they saw us as occupiers and wanted us to leave. And what we realized was we share all of those goals, right? But we've got to do all of the previous ones before we leave. And our company commander came up with a very controversial decision at the time, which was, let's start holding meetings with high-value targets who were nationalists. Okay, I mean, literally, we have these huge intel reports on these sheikhs, imams, they're killing Marines, they're financing the insurgency, and we started scheduling meetings and meeting with them. And our pitch to them was, we're a new unit here, we're here to protect the population, forgive the Marine units that were previously here for whatever they've done, and we're gonna do the same to you. Let's rid the city of Al-Qaeda, let's protect the population, and then we'll leave. And ultimately, it was super successful. And the first 3 months, we literally did a census, like a US-style census of every house in the entire area of operations. We would take a squad of Marines, we would take an interpreter, and we would meet with every single house. We had satellite imagery, we numbered every single house, and we wrote down the names of all the occupants of each house. And for the first 3 months, we saw no progress, none. And all of our sister companies made fun of us. They called us Mooj lovers. They said, hey, Marines are killers. Marines don't take census. And we were really facing a lot of pushback. But ultimately, around that third, fourth month, the intel just started dropping. People just started telling us, hey, this family's Al-Qaeda, this guy's Al-Qaeda. And before long, we just started systematically removing them from the area of operations. And I think that was the greatest lesson for us, that really we thought outside the box, we did everything for a reason. And when we came back to, the financial world, this was post 2008 financial crisis, and we thought a lot of different things needed to be changed in the financial industry, and we did that through Lima One Capital. So I think that's really how we came up with do everything for a reason.
John's comment that they met with all of these leaders that they thought we shared some common goals with. His picture was on the front page of the New York Times in his full combat gear, sitting in a chair, his helmet, his M16 pointed downwards, with all geared up. A little kid about this tall, sitting in a chair right next to him, looking up at him, and John is looking the other way, waiting for the kid's father to come into the room to meet with him. It was an amazing picture, full color picture on the front page of the New York Times.
It was just a cool, the kids over there, tons of American troops handed out soccer balls and lollipops. Okay, if you're a kid in Iraq, what are the two things you want? Soccer balls and lollipops. So kids would just come our way for those two reasons, and it's just it was an iconic photo just because we're wearing 75 pounds of gear, night vision goggles, all these comms on us, and you have a little kid in sandals and a man dress, and it was quite a contrast.
You have a chapter, John, or top, called Build a Team of Killers. So what are the characteristics in the business world of a so-called killer, and what can employers learn from your hiring practices?
Sure. I mean, it sounds like a controversial chapter, right? Build a team of killers. Right? And even our publisher at HarperCollins gave us some pushback on that, but we stood our ground and we weren't going to allow them to change it. But really what that means is you hire people that have a killer attitude, killer grit, killer determination, people that want to be successful. And the way we looked at our hiring process, and this, over 9 years at Lima One Capital, I probably interviewed over 500 people. If you aligned with those core values with us, regardless of your experience, we're hiring you. You're getting hired, because those are the things we can't teach you. I can teach you how to underwrite a loan, process a loan, service a loan. I could teach you how to do administrative work. I can't teach you the intangibles. If you had those, you were going to be an employee. That is just how we operated. A great story when we in this chapter. John and I were invited to one of our employees' wedding, and the bartender there was a former Marine, had just gotten out, and he was Purple Heart, earned the Purple Heart. He was an Amtracker, got out as a sergeant, single father, worked in manufacturing during the day, and he picked up some hours bartending at bars. So we just started talking to him. I knew immediately. Now, it's not because he poured us stiff drinks, but I knew immediately we were going to hire this guy because he had all those intangibles. He never underwrote a loan, but we'll teach him that. So those are some of the things that we did. How we built this company was basing it off of core values. We'll train you to do everything else. Now, there's a sacrifice in that as an entrepreneur or business owner, right? It's not a fire and forget weapon day one. It's going to cost some money with training and taking time, but it's worth it in every sense.
And one thing I would say, just for all the business owners or HR people out there, that opens up, if you hire people based on core values as opposed to industry experience, that opens your world to such a huge pool of applicants that no other company wants to touch, right? Because how do most financial services companies operate? Hey, I need an underwriter. Okay, let me see all the resumes of all former or current underwriters. So they're gonna look for someone that has 9 years experience, who worked for 8 different companies, who's actually probably a terrible employee, but because they have, quote, industry experience, they're gonna hire them. And we actually did the opposite. And if you had industry experience as an underwriter, there was almost no shot of you being hired at Lima One, because we thought you were a job hopper. and we thought you had been trained wrong. And I remember we had SG Capital, which was a huge hedge fund. It was really our second group of institutional capital that we had. We had them down here. They were super impressed with the company. At that time, and still to this day, we have less than a 1% foreclosure rate. We had a very high credit score. Our loans performed really well. And we go to this, normal, what you do at the end of every pitch, you end on a big, boring 4-hour dinner, right? And we went to Larkin's, and we were there, and we knew we were going to close SG Capital. And the head of SG Capital said, "John, we really love your company, but we can't finance you." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "Your underwriters don't have any experience." And I said, "Yes, we intentionally do that." And he goes, "Well, why is that?" And I said, "Well, all these people just created the entire meltdown of the entire financial world. Why would I want to hire them?" So that, looking back on it, that probably wasn't the most tactful thing to say. But he said, "Hey, we're not going to do it." But you know who came back 6 weeks later? Yeah. SG Capital. And they said, "We were wrong. We like the way you do things. We understand your hiring practices." And about a year later, we were around SG Capital, and they were bragging on Lima One. And you know what the number one thing they said? "We love their hiring practices," which, we almost fell out of our chairs hearing. But I think, I always equate it to the Marine Corps. If you hired Marines based on combat experience, how many Marines are you going to have? Right? I mean, you're going to be limited to people that grew up in Chicago. So that's just kind of how we build a team of killers.
And Tom, when you both signed a copy of the book and mailed it to your publisher with your thanks. I hope that you signed the title page to the chapter, Hiring Killers. So there's a chapter called Empower Your Fire Teams in the book, and it has a powerful story, and would one of you share that with us?
Sure. I think when we talk about in this chapter, Empower Your Fire Teams, I kind of want to take a quick step back. Is how we organized Lima One Capital is almost eerily and identical, or eerily similar to a rifle company. We set it up in platoons, underwriting and processing, construction management, and servicing. So 3 platoons. And then we had a headquartered platoon, right? So just imagine the structure of a rifle company. Headquartered platoon, HR, and accounting. But not only we just organized it that way, what we did is we limited the amount of direct reports that any individual, to include John and I, had in the company. And that was limited to 4 or 5 people. So what we ended up starting up doing is breaking up our employees into fire teams of 4 or 5. Gave those leaders at the lowest level, and what all of you are familiar with is decentralization of command, allowing them to make the decisions on the ground, and it takes a lot of trust, but on a daily basis, to make those decisions on the ground, to kind of free John and I up to do strategic level thinking. Where are we going to be at in a year? What are our new programs going to be? Let's go out and do another capital raise instead of worrying about, hey, these 3 people have been late 3 days in a row. We don't have to deal with that. We gave that power down to the lowest level. And it became very, very functional. But it empowers those people that you put as team leaders to make decisions, become better leaders, and grow in the company. I mean, I could name probably 8 or 10 of them right now are managing directors at Lima One Capital that started off as an underwriter and grew through that process. Quick story in there, which is, it was a tough story. We had a great corporal, one of our best squad leaders. I called him the Lion of Lima Company. His name was John Thompson. They were out on a patrol one night as we were about to, they were doing like a deep reconnaissance patrol as we were expanding our territory in Ramadi, and we were trying to find a new place to set up patrol bases. Unfortunately, on the way back, his radio operator stepped on pressure plate, IED, and Corporal Thompson was killed. And it was very, very chaotic, right? It was 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. As many of you have been there or can imagine, crap's hitting the fan. Immediately, so he's the squad leader, immediately his 3 fire team leaders step up to the plate, call in the QRF, call in the medevac, start providing security, start pushing out local patrols to see what's going on. These are young men, 18, 19, 20 years old, who step up to do that. Also, we talk about in this book, 50 meters away was their platoon commander, hiding behind a brick wall, nowhere to be found, totally out of the fight. But those young men, those young enlisted Marines, stood up and took control of the situation. That lieutenant was relieved in combat and sent back home, but that's just a great example in the book we talk about. If you empower these people, if you train them right, when stuff hits the fan, whether it's in combat or the battle of business, those people are going to step up and be there for you.
There's a chapter in your book called No Comfort-Based Decisions. And in it, there's a story that you said you debated whether or not to add to the book. Tell us about that story.
So just some background on writing the book. How many people from other services do we have here? Okay, wow, a lot. So you guys can go ahead and admit you guys are shocked that 2 Marines can write book, right? That's all right. Took us 2 years. We're already working on the sequel, though. It's going to be Read Like a Marine. It's going to be a coloring book. So you can bring your kids to the next lecture in a couple of years. But over the 2-year period that we wrote Lead Like a Marine, we struggled with what to include and what not to include, because you want to be loyal to the Marines that were there. They signed up. You don't want to disclose all of your garbage, but you also want people to learn from your mistakes. And this story was very, very difficult, and we went back and forth whether we wanted to tell it or not. But one of the things that impacted us so much in Ramadi was what we called no comfort-based decisions. And a comfort-based decision is any decision that you make that puts the mission at risk in order to improve your comfort. So in Ramadi, we had different rules, and our main rule was, hey, number one, if we lose a Marine, we should only lose one because of dispersion, right? We should never lose Marines because we were careless or we were lazy or we made comfort-based decisions. And we had one of our platoons in the company. We put them at what's called an entry checkpoint, ECP2, coming into Ramadi. Ramadi is actually in the middle in the Sunni capital between the Euphrates River and the Habaniya Canal, and you had to cross the Euphrates River to come in. And what we had set up as a military over there was a checkpoint, very similar to a way station on the interstate. And everyone, foot traffic, cars, trucks, they would all have to go through the entry checkpoint and be checked by the Iraqi police for weapons, explosives. They'd have their IDs checked. And we put a platoon over there, 2nd platoon, to monitor the Iraqi police checking everyone coming into the city. Now, in theory, it's a very easy mission, right? You hang out one squad at a time, you hang out in a building, and you just make sure the Iraqi police are doing their job. You're not even actually inspecting the vehicles. But the problem was, it was super hot. Temperatures in Ramadi reach 120 degrees. You're sandwiched in between 2 bodies of water, so humidity is terrible. You're bored, and the only source of power was a generator that did not have enough power to actually power the one refrigerator we had there. So even the water that the Marines drank boiled, very, very close to boiling. So it was a miserable experience. And what happened was that platoon, over a period of days, started making bad decisions, comfort-based decisions. And each day, an ice truck would come into the city. So the Marines, what they started doing, and what we were warned over and over from day one, was do not show Al-Qaeda patterns. They're watching everything. And the ice truck came in, and one Marine would go out with our interpreter, who was a US citizen named Steve from Detroit, and they would purchase ice for the Marines. First day, everything went as planned. Second day, everything went as planned. Third day, everything went as planned. Fourth day, Steve and a fire team leader went out to purchase ice, and there was no ice in that truck that day. It was all C4 explosives. And they detonated, suicide bomber detonated the ice truck, killed 12 Iraqi police, killed our fire team leader, and killed our U.S. Terp, Steve. And Top and I both responded to that terrible day and saw the carnage. And the reason we tell that story, because it is very painful to tell, is that we all make comfort-based decisions, whether we're in the military or whether we're raising our kids. I have a 7.5, 5.5, and 4-year-old now. I can tell you I can make tons of comfort-based decisions to not discipline. But we tell that story in order to save lives and improve people's lives. And it was a very tough day, but that's one of the greatest lessons that we learned was don't make comfort-based decisions.
I think we're going to wrap up. Can we talk about corporal level?
Yeah.
Tom, anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, it's tough to read, it was tough to write, and it was tough to live through, but we think it's an example of what's important. And comfort is really easy. It's hard to take the other path in the road.
Ask you to make your way over to the table while I say goodbye to you. So you need to forward march now.
Thanks for having us here, Bob. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.